first snowflake landed on the orphanage window before sunrise. It did not melt. 17-year-old Odessa Lark pressed one finger against the glass and watched another white speck settle beside it. September had 12 days left. The maple trees were still holding half their leaves, yet the wind outside carried the hard smell of frozen stone. Behind her, her twin sister, Verity, closed their father's weather ledger. "It has started," Verity said. Odessa looked toward the narrow beds where 20 children still slept beneath patched blankets. No one stored enough wood. Verity's jaw tightened. She had warned them 3 times. The matron had laughed the first time. The town minister had called it wickedness the second. By the third warning, no one laughed. They simply stopped looking the twins in the eye. That morning, the orphanage doors opened before breakfast. Mrs. Temperance Booth stood in the front hall with one hand hidden inside her apron pocket. She was 65, tall and narrow, with gray hair pulled so tightly that the skin near her ears shone white. At her feet sat a flour sack containing everything the twins owned. 2 books, a chipped hatchet, a wool shawl, 4 dried apple rings, and an iron key their father had placed in Odessa's hand 6 years earlier. "You have frightened the younger children long enough," Mrs. Booth said. "You will leave before the town wakes." Verity glanced toward the stairway. A small face watched through the railing. Fletcher Peyton, 12 years old, held one hand against his left ear. A thin line of dried blood ran down his neck. Mrs. Booth had struck him the night before after catching him bringing the twins a candle. Verity bent and lifted the sack. "We were not trying to frighten anyone." Mrs. Booth's fingers closed around something inside her pocket. For 1 second, a strip of faded blue ribbon showed above the cloth. Verity knew what hung from that ribbon. Their father's bronze war medal. Mrs. Booth had kept it for 6 years. Verity looked at the pocket, then at the woman's face. "You should buy twice the flour," she said. "The road east will close before November." Mrs. Booth opened the door. Cold air rushed into the hall and moved across the floorboards. "The Lord protects honest people." Odessa stepped outside first. Verity followed. The door shut behind them with a sharp wooden crack. Neither girl turned around. The road leaving Mercer's Crossing followed the Cumberland River for half a mile. Smoke rose from chimneys that should not have been burning so early in the year. Faces appeared behind curtains as the twins passed. No doors opened. No one offered bread. No one asked where 2 thin girls planned to sleep. 19 years had passed since the war, but Mercer's Crossing still carried it into church every Sunday. Union families sat on the left. Confederate families sat on the right. 3 empty pews remained between them. The twins' father had worn Union blue. That was enough for some people. Isaiah Lark had returned from the war with no interest in medals or speeches. He had built a small cabin outside town and taught his daughters to study what others ignored. The height of creek water, the thickness of squirrel nests. The month geese began flying south. The direction crows faced before rain. "The land does not lie," he had told them. "People lie about what the land is saying." In August, the squirrels began hiding nuts. In early September, the geese crossed the valley. Red berries bent the mountain ash branches almost to the ground. Then the wolves came down from the high ridges while deer still carried summer coats. Every sign pointed to the same thing. Winter was coming early. A hard one. The townspeople had an almanac saying otherwise. Reverend Ambrose Kilgore had stood in the church aisle and called the twins proud. 2 girls with a notebook do not know more than men who have studied the seasons for 50 years. Verity had watched his right hand while he spoke. It trembled whenever she mentioned her father. Now, walking west beneath a sky turning the color of old iron, she kept thinking about that hand. Their father had left only one direction. 2 days west. He had spoken those words while lying sick with fever, his skin burning against the pillow. When the world drives you out, walk west. 2 days. The key opens the place I made for you. He died before sunrise. Their mother had already been buried 3 weeks. The twins were 11. For 6 years, that key had remained wrapped in cloth beneath Odessa's mattress. Now it hung from a cord around her neck. By midday, Mercer's Crossing had vanished behind the trees. The path climbed into hardwood forest. Dry leaves snapped beneath their boots. Wind moved through bare upper branches with a low, steady moan. Verity counted the miles by creek crossings and ridge turns. Odessa said almost nothing. Near sunset, they found shelter beneath a fallen chestnut tree. Verity spread the wool shawl over both of them. The ground pulled heat from their backs, no matter how tightly they pressed together. Their bread had gone hard. Each girl ate one dried apple ring. Odessa held the second ring in her palm for several seconds, then placed it back inside the sack. "For tomorrow," she said. During the night, Verity woke to the sound of her sister's teeth striking together. She pulled Odessa closer and covered her head with the shawl. A white frost slowly formed across the fallen tree above them. At dawn, the frost did not melt. They walked until their heels bled inside their boots. The trail narrowed along a rock wall. Pines replaced the hardwoods. The air smelled of sap and wet stone. Then Odessa stopped. Her fingers closed around Verity's sleeve. 50 yards ahead, a gray wolf stood in the center of the path. Its ribs showed beneath its coat. Its head hung low. It did not run. Verity reached for the chipped hatchet. Her father had carved a small crescent into the iron head years before. As her fingers closed around the handle, she felt something pressed inside the gap beneath the blade. A roll of oilcloth. She pulled it free. Inside was a pinch of yellow powder and a folded strip of paper. Her father's handwriting covered one side. "A small amount on fire will turn a wolf, bear, or mountain cat. Do not waste it." Verity looked at the wolf, then at the paper. Their father had hidden it inside the hatchet before he died. He had known they would take this road. She placed a pinch of powder on a dry leaf and struck the hatchet with a piece of flint. A spark caught. Yellow smoke rose with a sharp, bitter smell. The wolf stepped backward. Its ears flattened. Then it turned and disappeared into the pines. Odessa stared at the empty trail. He left more than the key. Verity folded the paper and placed it inside her coat. "We have not found all of it yet." They walked until dusk. That night, when Verity broke open the last rye loaf, green mold covered the center. She cut away what she could and divided the clean piece between them. Odessa ate slowly. "We could go back," she said. Verity looked east through the trees. Somewhere beyond the ridges, Fletcher slept beneath Mrs. Booth's roof, with dried blood beside his ear. "No," Verity said. She reached into the sack and pulled out their father's old book. Its cover had swollen from damp. She had not opened it since his death. When she lifted the front cover, a folded note slipped into her lap. Her hand stopped. Odessa moved closer. Verity unfolded the paper. "If you are reading this, my girls, the town has finally sent you away. Do not turn back. The cave is west of the split limestone ridge. The key opens the inner door. What you see first is not all I left." At the bottom, their father had written 2 final words. "Keep going." Verity raised her eyes toward the black mountains ahead. Far above the pines, something pale drifted through the darkness. One flake, then another. And somewhere beyond the next ridge, hidden behind stone, an iron door had been waiting 6 years for the twins to arrive. Snow followed them through the night. It gathered on Verity's shoulders and melted down the back of her dress. Odessa walked behind her, one hand gripping the sack and the other holding the iron key against her chest. By morning, the trail had disappeared. Only the shape of the land remained. A steep ridge rose ahead, split through the center by a pale wall of limestone. Verity stopped. The split ridge. Odessa lifted her head. Neither girl spoke again. They climbed on hands and knees where the ground became too steep for their worn boots. Loose stone rolled beneath them. Thorn branches caught their sleeves. Once, Odessa slipped hard enough to tear the skin from her palm. Verity tied the wound with a strip from her underskirt. Then they kept climbing. "Wait, before we move on, what do you think about the story so far? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I am truly curious to know." Near midday, they found the entrance. It did not look like a place meant for living. A narrow cut opened in the side of the hill, half covered by wild grapevines and dead brush. A rotting plank door leaned across it. Rust had eaten through the hinges. A square iron lock hung from the wood. Odessa pulled the key from her neck. Her fingers were so stiff that Verity had to guide the metal into the lock. Odessa turned it. Nothing moved. She tried again. The key bent slightly beneath the pressure. "Stop," Verity said. She examined the lock, then the door. "The key is not for this." Their father's note had said the same thing. "The key opens the inner door." Verity raised the hatchet. 3 strikes broke the rotten plank around the lock. The wood folded inward with a deep groan. Cold darkness waited behind it. The twins stood at the opening, listening. Water dripped somewhere far inside. No animal moved. No wind came from the passage. Verity lit the last candle stub. The flame bent once, then steadied. They stepped inside. The entrance passage was tight enough that their shoulders brushed the stone. After 20 feet, the walls widened. The ceiling rose beyond the candlelight. The cold changed. Outside, the wind had cut through cloth and skin. Inside, the air rested against them. Cool, still, and dry. Odessa touched the wall. "This place is warmer than the orphanage cellar." They moved deeper. At the back of the main chamber, water slipped from a crack in the limestone and gathered in a shallow stone basin. Verity knelt. She dipped 2 fingers into it. Her hand jerked back. Odessa crouched beside her. "Is it hot?" "No." Verity touched it again. "It is warm." Odessa placed both hands in the water. The dirt loosened from her cracked skin. A thin cloud moved through the basin. For the first time since leaving Mercer's Crossing, her shoulders dropped. They drank slowly. Then they washed the blood from their feet. The water did not stop flowing. A narrow crack in the floor carried the excess deeper into the mountain. Their father had not sent them toward an empty hole. He had sent them toward water that could not freeze. Verity lifted the candle toward the wall above the spring. Letters had been scratched into the limestone. Isaiah Lark, 1864. Odessa reached out and traced the first letter. He was here during the war. Verity looked around the chamber again. A black mark stained the ceiling near a natural crack. Old smoke. Along one wall, a low shelf had been cut into the stone. Broken clay jars sat beneath it. A rusted hook remained fixed near the ceiling. Their father had lived here. Perhaps for weeks. Perhaps longer. Odessa sat beside the spring and pressed her back to the wall. "He knew this place would keep us alive." Verity did not answer. She was studying the room. Her father had taught her that anything prepared by a careful man carried signs of his hands. A straight cut where nature made curves. A mark placed where only the right person would look. A stone that rested differently from the stones around it. She moved the candle along the rear wall. 12 feet from the spring, she stopped. A square slab had been fitted into the limestone near the floor. Its edges had been sealed with clay. "Bring the hatchet." Together, they broke the old clay and worked the blade beneath the slab. The stone shifted. Behind it sat a tin box wrapped in oiled cloth. Odessa drew in a slow breath. Verity lifted the box out and placed it on the ground. Inside lay a small powder horn, a pouch of percussion caps, a folded paper, and a leather bag heavy enough to pull the bottom of the box downward. Odessa loosened the cord. Gold coins spilled across the stone floor. The candlelight moved over them. $20 pieces. Dozens of them. Neither twin reached for the money at first. They had spent 6 years sharing bread crusts. They had worn dresses patched with cloth from dead children's clothes. They had been told they owed the orphanage for every bowl of meal placed before them. Now almost $1,000 lay at their knees. Verity picked up the folded paper. The first line was written in their father's hand. "The men of Mercer's Crossing who came for me in the summer of 1866. Below it were 12 names. The first was Zebulon Martian, owner of the general store. The second made Verity's fingers lock around the page. Ambrose Kilgore. Odessa read over her shoulder. The minister? Verity continued down the list. Some names belonged to dead men. Others belonged to families still living in town. At the bottom, their father had written one final warning. If they learn you found this place, they will come. A dull sound moved through the cave. The twins turned. It came again. Not from inside. From beyond the broken outer door. A boot pressing into snow. Then another. Someone was standing at the cave entrance. Odessa reached for the old rifle. Verity closed her hand around the hatchet. The figure outside did not call their names. He did not ask whether anyone was inside. He only struck the broken door 3 slow times. Knock. 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 The knocking never came again. Instead, the sound outside disappeared beneath the growing wind. Verity raised one hand, asking Odessa to stay still. The cave became so quiet that they could hear water slipping into the stone basin at the back of the chamber. Another minute passed. Then a voice drifted through the broken doorway. I know someone is inside. The voice belonged to an old man. Steady, tired, not loud enough to threaten. Verity stepped closer without lowering the hatchet. Who are you? My name is Gideon Ashcroft. Neither sister answered. The stranger continued. Your father once carried me through these mountains when I could no longer walk. Odessa looked toward Verity. Their father had never spoken of another soldier. Leave your rifle outside, Verity called, and walk backward 20 steps. Without arguing, the old man laid a long Kentucky rifle in the snow. Then he counted each step aloud until he stood beyond the trees. Only after that did Verity open the cave entrance. An elderly man stood with his empty hands raised. Beside him sat a gray hunting dog whose muzzle had turned almost white with age. The dog never barked. It only watched. You carry Isaiah's hatchet, the old man said quietly. I would know that mark anywhere. Verity studied his face. One finger on his left hand was missing. His coat had been repaired so many times that almost no 2 pieces of leather matched. He looked like a man who had lived more years outdoors than inside walls. You knew our father? He saved my life. The words hung between them. Verity finally stepped aside. You may come in. The dog entered first. It walked straight to the hearth, circled once, and lay down as though it had slept there before. Gideon smiled. He remembers this place better than I do. The sisters exchanged another silent glance. That sentence carried a weight he could not have invented. The old man warmed his hands near the fire before speaking again. In the summer of 1864, Confederate riders cornered us 3 ridges east of here. I had a bullet in my leg. Your father carried me to this cave. He looked around the chamber. Most men would have abandoned me. He stayed. He hunted. He dressed the wound. When I could finally stand again, he made me promise something. Odessa leaned forward. What promise? If he ever died before his daughters were grown, I was to watch these mountains. The cave fell silent. I waited for years, Gideon continued. I never came because he believed you would be safer in town than hidden up here. He lowered his eyes. I was wrong. Verity stared into the fire. So he expected this. Gideon nodded once. He knew some men would never stop chasing the past. He asked to see the paper from the tin box. Verity unfolded it carefully. Gideon's weathered face changed as he read the names. His finger stopped over one. Ambrose Kilgore. He changed his name. Verity looked up. What? His real name was Silas Rathburn. Odessa felt the warmth leave her hands. He rode with a group that hunted Union scouts after the war ended. He escaped justice. He disappeared. I never imagined he would return wearing a preacher's coat. The fire cracked softly. Outside, snow drifted across the cave entrance. Gideon folded the list again. If he learns you are alive and living here, he will not leave you alone. Verity lifted the old Springfield rifle from the tin box. It still works? Gideon inspected the barrel. Your father covered it with tallow before hiding it. He smiled faintly. He expected patience to preserve what people could not. For the next 3 days, Gideon stayed. He taught the sisters everything Isaiah had once taught him. how to find deer crossing frozen creeks, how to dry meat so it lasted months, how to split oak instead of pine for longer fires, how to build a stone wall inside the cave entrance that would stop both wind and bullets. Each lesson carried their father's fingerprints. It felt as though Isaiah had planned them years before. Slowly, the cave changed. Logs became walls. Clay sealed the cracks. Flat stones formed a broad fireplace beneath the natural chimney. The cold never reached the back of the chamber. One afternoon, Odessa noticed bright green moss growing beside the warm spring. She touched the soil beneath it. It isn't frozen. Verity knelt beside her. The earth felt almost warm. A thought appeared in both sisters' minds at the same moment. A garden. But there isn't enough sunlight, Odessa whispered. Verity stood and studied the ceiling. A narrow draft brushed her face. She lifted the candle. High above them, a square stone rested inside a carefully cut opening. Not natural. Made by human hands. Gideon climbed onto a stack of rocks while Verity steadied him. Together they pushed. The stone slid aside. A narrow shaft of daylight poured into the cave. Golden light reached the warm patch beside the spring. Odessa laughed softly for the first time since leaving Mercer's Crossing. He built us a garden. Within days they planted every seed they possessed. Turnips, spinach, kale, parsley. Each morning tiny green shoots stretched toward the shaft of light. Outside, winter tightened its grip. Inside, life continued growing. Weeks passed. The cave slowly became a home instead of a hiding place. Then, one freezing afternoon, Gideon returned from checking his traps with an expression Verity had never seen before. He carried no game, only a folded piece of paper. A boy risked everything to send this. Verity unfolded the message. The handwriting was uneven. She recognized it immediately. Fletcher. Miss Verity. Miss Odessa. Reverend Kilgore comes every day now. Mrs. Booth is afraid of him. The children are hungry. They keep asking where you went. I heard him say your father left something in the mountains. He says he will find it before Christmas. Please don't come back. He is coming to you. Verity folded the paper without speaking. Odessa stared into the fire. Neither sister noticed the snow outside growing heavier. Far below the mountain, a line of riders was already leaving Mercer's Crossing, and at their head rode a man dressed in a black preacher's coat. The storm arrived before sunset. Snow swept across the Cumberland ridges with such force that whole pine trees disappeared behind white curtains. By midnight, the trail leading to the cave no longer existed. Inside, the fire burned low and steady. Verity checked the heavy wooden bar across the entrance one final time. Odessa loaded the Springfield exactly as Gideon had taught her. Neither sister expected sleep. Outside, Chieftain suddenly lifted his head. A deep growl rolled through the cave. Gideon stood without a word. They're here. A moment later came the sound. Boots crushing fresh snow. Then another pair. Then another. Not travelers. Men walking together. 3 slow knocks struck the outer gate. No one answered. The silence lasted only a few seconds. Then Reverend Ambrose Kilgore spoke. His voice carried easily through the wind. Girls, come out. You have hidden long enough. We only wish to speak. Verity remained behind the stone wall. You already said everything back in Mercer's Crossing. The minister's voice lost its gentle tone. You possess property that belongs to this town. It belongs to my father. It belonged to a traitor. Gideon quietly shook his head. He's trying to make you angry. Verity did not answer again. Outside, another man stepped forward. An axe slammed into the wooden gate. Once, twice. The thick pine beams held. Odessa rested the rifle across the firing gap Gideon had built into the wall. She did not point it at anyone. She simply waited. Another blow landed. Then another. Wood splintered. The storm swallowed the sound almost immediately. Gideon reached into the fire. He picked up a burning branch and handed it to Verity. Now, Verity carried the flame to a narrow trench they had dug 2 weeks earlier. Dry pine needles hidden beneath fresh snow caught at once. Fire raced across the slope faster than the attackers expected. Not a wildfire. Only a wall of bright smoke and sparks. The horses panicked. One rider lost control and disappeared into the white darkness. Another stumbled backward. The attack stopped. Kilgore shouted for his men to regroup. Before they could move again, a rifle cracked from high above the ridge. The bullet struck a pine tree beside the minister. Snow exploded from the trunk. Then another rifle answered from farther up the mountain. Then another. Kilgore froze. They aren't alone. He looked toward the trees. Shapes slowly emerged through the falling snow. Not soldiers. Mountain families. Old trappers. Hunters. Widows wrapped in heavy blankets. Men carrying lanterns. Women holding axes. At the front stood Wilhelmina Thorne with her young son beside her. Behind her came Zebulon Martian carrying no weapon at all. Only the folded sales record proving Kilgore had tried to buy poison. More people followed. Some had received medicine from the twins. Others had received food. Still others had simply grown tired of living under old lies. No one shouted. No one rushed forward. They simply stood together. Kilgore looked around. For the first time in many years, no one lowered their eyes when he looked back. Zebulon stepped forward. I lied to myself for 20 years. No longer. He handed the folded paper to the county deputy who had climbed the mountain with the others after receiving Wilhelmina's letter. The deputy opened it beneath a lantern. He read every word. Then he turned toward the minister. Ambrose Kilgore. Or should I say, Silas Rathburn. The minister's face emptied of color. I don't know what nonsense you've been told. The deputy unfolded another document. Federal records sent from Frankfurt. A faded photograph. A younger man stood among armed riders. His face had changed with age. His eyes had not. The deputy held the picture beside Kilgore's face. No one needed convincing. The mountain became silent except for the wind. Kilgore slowly stepped backward. Then he ran. He never reached the trees. The deep snow swallowed his footing. He slid down the rocky slope and disappeared into the darkness below. The remaining riders threw down their weapons. None of them wished to continue. By sunrise, the storm had finally begun to weaken. County officers recovered the minister before noon. Alive, cold, and carrying enough evidence in his saddlebags to uncover the crimes Isaiah Lark had tried to warn his daughters about 20 years earlier. Weeks passed. The road reopened. News traveled through every valley in eastern Kentucky. The charges against the twins vanished. So did the whispers that had followed them since childhood. Mrs. Temperance Booth walked to the cave before Christmas. She climbed the mountain alone. The bronze medal still hung from the faded blue ribbon inside her apron. She placed it gently into Verity's hands. I should have returned this years ago. Verity waited. The old woman looked toward the fire before speaking again. Your father saved my younger brother during the war. He asked me to protect his daughters if anything happened to him. I believed keeping you inside those walls was protection. I was wrong. Odessa quietly reached across the table and accepted the medal. No one spoke for a long while. Outside, snow drifted softly across the hillside. Spring arrived slowly. The small garden inside the cave turned bright green once again. Children from Mercer's Crossing began visiting with baskets of seeds instead of questions. Fletcher came first. His limp remained. His smile did not. Gideon built a small cabin beside the cave entrance. Chieftain spent most afternoons sleeping beside the warm stone hearth. One evening, as sunlight poured through the narrow ceiling opening their father had carved years before, Verity stood beside the spring. She rested the weather ledger on the stone shelf. Its pages now held new entries. Not warnings. Not predictions. Only seasons. Birds returning. Fresh tracks after rain. The first wildflowers. Odessa closed the cave door behind them. The iron key remained hanging around her neck. Not because they feared someone would take the cave away. Because every time it touched her hand, It reminded her of one simple truth. Their father had never prepared them to survive one winter. He had prepared them to build a life. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves powerful American frontier survival stories.